Is John Denver. John Denver's got a new album out apart from his tour. The album's called Higher Ground, and we just might mention something that we come to take John for granted because he's in Australia so much these days, but John is one of the 5 biggest selling recording artists of all time, one of the top 5 of all time, which is an extraordinary introduction. Please welcome John Denver in Darwin. John, thank you for waiting for us. It seems easier sometimes to talk to Los Angeles or New York than to get to Darwin.
I can believe that.
Now listen, there was an earthquake up there. Did the earth move for you last night?
It was actually this morning, and yes, it did move quite a bit. It was, it's only the second time I've been in an earthquake, and it scared the dickens out of me.
Well, talking about earth-moving events, would you like to be in Moscow at the summit right now?
I really would like to be. There was a small opportunity for me to go. I was in Moscow about 5 weeks ago and expect to return in July, and I'm really sorry not to be there right now, but I had this commitment, and I'm very happy to be in Australia.
John, where would you take President Reagan? If you were there with him now, where would you take him? What would you show him in Russia?
Well, I have some friends in the Soviet Union that I'd love him to meet, to see, a regular Soviet family, the way that they live, the kind of people that they are. And I would take him to some places outside of Moscow. I'd love him to see Leningrad. The Hermitage Museum is one of the most incredible things in the world. You can't believe the art that's in this place. And there is a cemetery outside of Leningrad that I would like him to see. They're buried in this cemetery over 400,000 people of the over 600,000 who died in Leningrad alone in the Second World War. And he ought to see that.
Would you like to get Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Reagan together away from the lawyers and the diplomats and the protocol officers and just talk?
I really would, yeah. I've had the opportunity to meet both of them and a chance to sort of lead a discussion between the two of them and some areas where I'd like to see them addressing would be very exciting.
You had that 1% solution. You wrote a letter to Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Reagan and the Pope some time back. Tell us about the 1% solution and what was the reply?
Well, my idea is that part of what we're trying to do here is to establish trust between our societies. And my suggestion was that we take 1% of our defense budget in every country in the world, but starting off with the United States and the Soviet Union, and that we take half of that 1% and put it into a fund to work on problems of the country of origin. And the other half of 1% would go out into a global fund to deal with hunger around the planet, and then with environmental problems that concern us all. And I think that very real results could be achieved very quickly with that kind of funding. And I think it would be very easy then, perhaps in a year, to make it 5% and then 10%. And then pretty soon we'd have to start dismantling these weapons just because there's so many other good things being accomplished.
John, I guess the diplomats would say that's too simplistic. That can't happen.
Yeah, they live in a very complex world, I guess. But my experience has been that sometimes the simple approach is what works.
I guess, again, to borrow from John Denver, the music is the universal language. I mean, it's possible for you to say these sorts of things you're saying to us in Australia. I presume you said it in Moscow. I presume you've said it in China too.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What was the answer there? Did you get a reply from Mr. Gorbachev or from Mr. Reagan or the Pope?
Well, Mr. Reagan said that that's what Star Wars, SDI, was all about. And it sort of made me laugh. It's a contradiction in terms, in my opinion. The Pope sent me a message that said, he blessed me for his work. I'd met him once before and talked with him about my work in solving the problem of hunger in the world. And so he urged me to continue that and said it's necessary for us to do everything we can to create better relations between the superpowers. Mr. Gorbachev has evidently sent me a letter that I've not received yet. And so I'm very excited to see what he has to say. It was very interesting to meet with him last December in Washington at that summit and to talk about the hunger issue, and a couple of things happened subsequent to that. One is that some people from the Hunger Project, the Global Hunger Project, there's also one here in Australia, met with Andrei Gromyko, the president's son, and talked about the hunger issue. And the Soviets have made a commitment this past February for the first time in history of 250,000 metric tons of grain to the people suffering the drought in northeastern Africa. This is they've never done anything before, and so it's an incredible step for them to take, especially when you begin to realize that that's more grain than they actually have. So they're committing part of what they're going to purchase from other people around the world to these people suffering in Africa, and I think that's an incredible thing.
John, it's ironical you should say that, because later on the show we've got Leonard Teal, who's a great Australian, who's just come back from Ethiopia, and he makes the point, with World Vision, makes the point that the $12,000 million the Americans are spending on Star Wars, probably wasting at the moment, is that figure. For $25 a week, one can keep an Ethiopian family alive.
It's a very, very good point, sir, and absolutely true.
John, let's go to your album. Well, let's go to the tour. How was Darwin? That's your first time in Darwin. How was that last night?
My first time in Darwin. I love it up here. The warmth has been especially enjoyable, and even with the earthquake that we had this morning, I'd like to stay here a little bit longer. I had the chance to go over to Kakadu a couple of days ago and found that was an incredible experience, and you know, it's really very special up here.
I can't, given the fact that Alaska brought out half a dozen songs from you, given the fact that Colorado and even Australia, it's hard to imagine someone like John Denver going to Kakadu and not writing some songs.
Well, you know, that's exactly how I felt, and I'd love to have the chance to stay there and soak it up a little bit more, because I'm sure a song would come out of that.
John, Higher Ground is the title of the new album. I noticed that when we first spoke a few years back, I asked you then whether it was easy to write love songs when you're no longer in love, and you said no, it was real hard. You've written some love songs in this one.
Yes, I have, and that's because I'm in love again, you know. It's a wonderful thing.
One of the songs on there is Never a Doubt. In fact, you've dedicated the album to Cassie, and you've said never a doubt. Was there never a doubt that you'd find love again?
Well, truly, you believe that there is a partner in life for you, that there is someone there, and you know that you're going to be with that person. And so, although there were some dark nights where perhaps you wondered and you weren't so confident, there really was never a doubt that someplace, somewhere, I was going to find my partner in life. And I wrote the song, I guess, a year ago last October when Cassie and I were in Tahiti. I did a television show with Bob Hope. And, you know, that was truly the experience. There was never a doubt in my mind.
Now, you don't mind. I was going to say, in fact, you're obviously very proud, when you sang in January in Australia here, you're very proud to sing a love song to your lady before 1 million or so people.
Well, I was really unconscious of it. You know, I didn't know they were going to do that, and all of a sudden she was there, and I simply couldn't take my eyes off her. To be able to sing the song for her, people have asked me if I'm going to sing it when we get married. Evidently, a lot of people are using the song in their wedding now here in Australia. And I don't think I can do that. I think that'd be asking too much.
Why would it be asking too much, John?
Well, I'd probably turn into a puddle.
Are you getting, we won't probe, but are you getting married on this tour, or is it sometime in the distance?
Well, we had talked about getting married down here, and actually there's just so much stuff going on with the tour, and I've got my kids coming down, and it just really doesn't feel appropriate to get married and then go off and do a concert. And so we've now scheduled it back in Colorado, probably in September.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you here in Sydney, of course, but someone's holding a card saying that your support act on this tour in Australia is Tommy Emmanuel, who's a great friend of ours too, and is a great guitarist. I'm sure you know. But in Adelaide on June the 1st and 2nd, you can catch John Denver. In Canberra, June the 4th. Brisbane, June the 6th. Melbourne, June the 7th and 8th. In Launceston, in Tassie, on June the 11th. Perth, June the 12th. Sydney, June 14, 15 and 16. And John has very graciously agreed to come and talk to us on the 14th when he comes to Sydney with a song and a chat. We look forward to it, John, as always. We thank you for your time. I know you've got to catch a plane, but thank you again for it.
My pleasure, Ray, and my regards to everybody there.
Thank you, John. Please thank John Denver for us. Hello and welcome once again. Welcome. Hang on to your hats. I don't know where we're going today. It's Friday, and Fridays are always tough, but today's going to be bigger and better than any of them. I think it's the last day of the school holidays, of course, for most families around Australia. Today's show is, in a sense, a tribute to kids, big and small. I'm not talking about a town like Dallas. That's for the tiny tots and the dummies who laugh at anything, including us. Anyway, we welcome you. We've got a big orchestra for you today. We've got the strings there as well, Jeffrey. We've got,
yes, indeed.
You name it. We've got all these children here. John Denver's our special guest today. That'll be fun, won't it? Great fun. Good friend of ours. Good man. Half Australian these days. A great mate. Would you like to see John in a town like Dallas? Yes! He's a country boy, but when he has something to say, even world leaders are keen to listen. And it seems he always has something worthwhile to say. Worth listening to. Would you please welcome our very special guest today, Mr. John Denver. Well, John, always good to see you.
Always great to be back in Australia and to visit you, Ray. Thanks.
You feel a bit half Australian these days? With
I
a
do
wife
feel half Australian, absolutely. My wife is Australian. My little baby, Cassie, our baby, Jessie, has an Australian citizenship, and I'm going to move here sooner or later, so I'm Australian.
Now, pleasing us. How old is Jessie Bill now?
Jessie's 4 months old.
Okay, and
what a sweetheart. She's got her mother's eyes. Otherwise, I think that I get to take the credit for everything else.
Is that right? Whose legs?
Well, she's got her mom's legs, too. I have to admit that. Lucky girl.
It's we spoke some years back. I think we first spoke in satellite from Colorado when you were there, and talked about writing love songs when you're not in love. You said it was kind of difficult then. These days, are you writing? Are you inspired because of Jessie and because of Cassie to write more songs?
Well, yes, and I've written a couple of songs that sort of have to do with Jessie. One song in particular called "The Gift You Are," which maybe I'll have a chance to do later on in the program for you. I think Beautiful. It's just one of my very best songs.
I don't think you wouldn't want to hear that, would you? But are you writing more now? I mean, we're going to talk about lots of things today, but are you back scribbling away?
I hope to this month. There are a lot of songs that are in the oven, and quite often I'll find myself writing down a phrase or something that's going on in my life or something that I've experienced. There are so many things going on right now environmentally. There's a lot of songs that have to do with different aspects of that. I was just up in Alaska recently and saw Prince William Sound firsthand, and I've got a song going on about that.
That was where the big oil spill was.
Yes, sir. Uh-huh. And a real tragedy in a whole lot of ways, in my opinion. But I took the year off to be with Cassie during her pregnancy and to be around when Jessie was born and to be with her the first few months of her life. And I've had the busiest year and the hardest year I think that I've ever had, mostly out of things that I've been involved in for WinStar and these environmental programs that we're doing.
I want to come back to that briefly, but can I just ask you, because you play with words and ideas, I mean, describe what was the sensation watching Jessie born? Well,
there's one that words just do not fit. You know, I had never seen anything born, and we saw one birth in the classes that we went to, and I delivered Jessie.
Did you?
And so all of a sudden there was this little face that popped up and looked right at me and blinked once, and it was just it was the most incredible experience of my life. I will simply never forget it as long as I live, and would never even assume that I could put all of the feelings, the emotions in words that go along with that experience.
Someone called that magnificent miracle. But did you cry?
It is a miracle. Oh yeah, I was just a pool. Bloody mess.
All right, let's talk about WinStar again. Interesting that it is the issue of the late 80s and hopefully the 90s, the environment now. But right back to Rocky Mountain High, and things you were writing before you became popular were about the environment, were about these issues, weren't they?
Yes, sir. Well, nature has always been the source of the greatest contentment in my life. When I was a child, I felt like I didn't have a lot of friends. My father was in the Air Force. We moved around a great deal. It's difficult for children sometimes to make friends. And the things that I thought about, the things that were on my mind, are not necessarily what my contemporaries were feeling or talking about. And I used to go out into the desert, or I'd climb up into a tree, or I'd be up in the mountains, and just anywhere that I could get out in nature. And there was a great solace for me there, and a great sense of peace and of rejuvenation. Like, although I wasn't tired then, now when I have a day out in the mountains, it's rejuvenating for me. So in any case, that was always a big part of my life. And then when I started writing songs, certainly many metaphors came to me. The way that I talk about things, I use metaphors from nature. Mm-hmm. And around all of that, as I got the chance to travel around the world, I found that there were things to be concerned about, there were things to be aware of, and issues that needed addressing. And it seems that intuitive feeling from my childhood and as I was growing up has turned out to be pretty right on.
Okay, WinStar, how did that begin?
Well, WinStar began actually as a dream when I was about 12 years old. And it had to do with these feelings of nature, and that sometime I was going to have a place in the mountains, and I knew that I was going to have friends all over the world. somehow. And I envisioned a place that people would come to from all over the world, that they would meet other people like themselves, that they would come away from this place strengthened, rejuvenated, going back to whatever their work was, wherever they lived in the world, and knowing that they weren't alone in their feelings, in the things that they were concerned about. And in 1976, I realized that I was finally in a position to be able to do something about this, or I ought to stop talking about it. And so with a friend of mine, Tom Crum, we founded the WinStar Foundation. And we've done some wonderful things. It's always been around the environment, although it's had to do with energy resources, I should say, and hunger in the world, the resolution of conflict. So many of the things, for me, WinStar was like a tool, a way to focus my energy on the things that I'm concerned about or have been involved in over all of these years.
So the concert tomorrow night is Higher Ground. You're going to touch on some of those issues as you've done in Japan, as you've done all around the States as well.
We were in Japan last Saturday night with this program, in Toronto, Canada, a few weeks ago, and we've done it 5 times in the United States in 5 different cities. There are 16 WinStar Connection groups in the United States, 1 in Canada, 1 in Tokyo, and 1 here in Sydney, Australia, which is how we happen to be doing this program. It's not a concert, although there are some pieces of music that I do to sort of underline the other information that we're presenting in the program. There are quite a few videos that we use. We're putting forth a lot of information, which I think, certainly the people here in Australia are already aware of, but perhaps doing it with a bit of a different perspective about how each of us is a little bit responsible for what we see out there in the world, and that each of us has it within us to make a difference out there and to begin doing the things that will, in fact, save us and save our planet.
We've been doing much of that, as I mentioned to you earlier, much of that this year on the program, and my sense is that your timing couldn't be more spot on, that now is the time where people keep saying to us, whenever we do something on the environment in Australia, they keep saying, well, that's fine, what can I do? What can I do to do it? And that's basically what you're about, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Everywhere I go in the world, and a part of the Higher Ground program is like a conversation, like this one we're having here. When you get together with people that you care about, you're having dinner, and it's not just idle social chatter, you talk about the things that you're interested in, the things that you're concerned about. And I've had this conversation really with people all over the world, in the Soviet Union, in China, in India, and they all want to know, what is it that I can do? And people feel like they're powerless in face with the enormity of the problems that confront us. And there are many things that you can do. In the United States, 26% of the toxic waste that we produce every year, and we produce in the United States 1 ton a year for every man, woman, and child. Can you imagine?
Toxic waste.
And 26% of that comes from our homes. And I'm sure that it's similar over here, although I doubt that it's the enormity of the amount that we're producing in the United States, but it's the same kind of thing.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about that and all the other issues, not just the environment, but people, in a moment with John Denver. One way to get back into it, what are we making weapons for, do you know?
Well, I simply don't know anymore. It's always been an expression of our feeling of separateness. It's always been a you or me world, which means me first, of course. And I think we're in a time when we have to begin living a you and me world. We have to begin thinking of ourselves as a global community and as a human family and living like that.
Are you more optimistic with Mikhail Gorbachev now and the movement towards some sort of rapprochement?
I certainly am. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Gorbachev when he was in Washington a year and a half ago, and have listened to his talks and read what he's been saying, and I think that he's perhaps the most courageous man in the world today, and the only true leader that's really out there. I think he's a remarkable man. What
would you say? I asked you this question once before when Ronald Reagan was president, but let's ask it again. If you could take George Bush to Russia, to the Soviet Union, where you've been, or to China, what would you show him?
First of all, I'd want to take him to meet the people. I've had the opportunity to visit with people in the Soviet Union, and they're just like ourselves. They have a wonderful sense of humor. I think Aussies and Soviets would get along wonderfully together. And they have a great feeling for their children. They love the outdoors. Everybody's wish in the Soviet Union is to have a country house. And they love lyrical songs. Annie's song is very, very popular over there. I learned how to sing it in Russian, and they loved it, you know. And they're wonderful, wonderful people.
You also did, in fact, the first fundraiser for the victims of Chernobyl.
Yes, we did a concert, a benefit in Kiev for the victims of Chernobyl, and it was quite a moving experience.
Can I ask some of the young people here, do you think about atomic war or world war? Do you think that you're going to survive? The world's going to be around long enough for you to have children? Or does war worry you?
Well, it's not something that you can avoid thinking about. I mean, obviously it is something that we all have to think about one time or another, because, I mean, even if it's just thinking about the impact of having nuclear power stations and things like that. But of course, warfare, I mean, a nuclear war would just wipe out everything.
But and something so like John's record there, I'm sorry, something like John's song where he says, why do we need weapons? What are weapons for? Do you understand?
Yes. All the time. I mean, just for an example, in general studies class, we do a unit called War and Aggression. And just that question came up, no one could answer it. We said, why are there nuclear weapons? And no one could answer the question.
Yeah. And what is the name of that class?
General Studies.
General Studies, and it's about war and aggression, or at least this.
It deals with just topical issues,
Far
just
out.
social issues.
Do you have classes that have to do with the environment?
Yep.
Also.
Geography and geography.
Sorry, tell us again. Sorry.
For unit geography and geography, we deal with the environment, how they're getting destroyed by human practices and that sort of thing.
Really, you know, in the United States, they had a study this past year, and there were an enormous number of young people, middle school age, who did not know where Italy was, who didn't know where Tasmania was. Can you imagine?
Yes.
And so a real failure in many places, and part of the educational system in the United States has got a long way to go to have programs like this.
Can I ask you, we'll seek John's comment in a second, but what do you think, when you see that news footage each night of those East German young people getting on the trains trying to escape to the West, what do you think? What sort of emotion does that bring in you? Can I ask you?
Anger.
I'm sorry, just...
It shouldn't happen. The world should be free so that everyone could go where they want to be, do what they want to do, as long as it's legal within moral standards and things like that.
But do you think of how lucky you are? Do you think of while you wonder whether you're going to get out of McDonald's?
Yeah, exactly. We have the choice to make decisions that they can only dream about. Things like that.
So do you have a sense of responsibility that goes along with that opportunity?
Yeah, it should be, we should encourage it to be worldwide so that the Eastern Bloc countries can open up, and at least then we can learn from them and they can learn from us.
And out of the opportunities that you are aware of, what would you like to do for your world? How would you like to take advantage of the kind of opportunities that you have? Anybody?
Yeah.
I think that if we keep going the way we are with war, we won't have a planet to live in if we keep going that way.
How old are you?
10.
Okay.
So do you feel that there's something that you can do that would change that?
Yes, you could write letters to the environment councils and all that, and to the parliament, and ask them if they could stop using nuclear weapons and everything.
What do you say to your mum and dad? What do you say about it? I mean, at the moment, do you think you can also tell your families what they should be doing?
Yes, I think that they should stop using stuff like that destroys things in the world, like CBFCs and all that, and should recycle and not use much paper, which you're just wasting.
Interesting. Now, what about in terms of recycling, as this young man said? I mean, in your families, do you recycle paper? Do you recycle bottles?
Just this morning, my mum was saying, "Oh, well, my little bit doesn't count," but they don't think of what of the world that we're going to live in the future. And then after I was silent for a minute, she thought, and she said, "Well, maybe we should." And I was really pleased to see that she was actually thinking about our world.
Great.
Yeah.
And you know what also was great is the transition there from thinking that my little bit doesn't count to thinking maybe there is something that I can do.
Every bit counts.
Every little bit counts. Absolutely.
People are lazy, and they're not going to. People are lazy generally, and they're not going to do it unless it's easy for them to do and cheaper.
Oh, can we talk more about that?
Let's do that. In fact, I'd like to. Let's go to a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about those issues. What else you got to say? We'll come back with John Denver in one moment. You may recall a couple of days back we actually crossed to Western Australia, just north of Perth, where that marine park was, where that a week or 2 week old baby pilot whale was being kept alive by some of the marine workers and biologists there. We had planned to cross with John to get an update on that, but we learned about half an hour ago that the whale died this morning, which is real sad, real sad. But it's also what we're talking about here in terms of the environment and saving not just baby whales, but baby humans as well. John, something we had Clifton Pugh on the show a couple of days back, vis-a-vis what these people are saying. And he's a great Australian artist, and he said he feared, he's putting all his money into conservation now, he said he fears that it's too late with adults, that you give adults away in terms of saving the environment. The only future is with kids.
Well, there are those who say that in the next 20 years, in our lifetime, still in our lifetime, we're going to determine whether or not the Earth remains inhabitable by human beings. And so it's the actions that we take, and it's the kind of example that we set for these young people, and certainly, the greatest part of that responsibility is going to fall on their shoulders, and their ability to be prepared for the problems that are coming, to be looking at them as intelligently and as realistically as these young people seem to be doing. But it is for our children. Who was it that said, we don't inherit the earth, and we're not so much, we borrow it from our children?
Ben Elton, the English writer, said that, a marvellous line, that we borrow it from the children.